how do I reconcile Republican Marxism with Dominion theology, right? Um, First of all, I want to explain what I mean by Republican Marxism. I mean, number one, that I am an advocate of republicanism as the ideal form of government. And by republicanism, I mean the delegation of political power to elected representatives in a res publica, uh, the public interest. Um, and when I talk about republicanism, I don't mean the American Republican Party, but rather republicanism as an ideal that begins in Plato's Republic and then found expression, concrete expression in the Roman Republic. Um, I am a Marxist, so I see the period where the Gracchus brothers were influential as a key point in the history of the Roman Republic. Um, in medieval Europe, you had the mercantile republics, Venice being the most important one, the whole idea of the mercantile republic. Um, then later on, in primitive capitalism, you had the mercantile Dutch Republic with the Dutch East India and West India companies. And finally, the French Republic, um, the radical phase of the French Republic between 1789 and 1793, and the primitive United States of America. Uh, yeah, the United States of America, of course. Um, not the primitive form in the sense of the Articles of Confederation, but the early United States, the early federal United States. Um, yeah, the whole episode of the Civil War was a big challenge, transformative. The Second Revolution, the whole American Revolution, 1776 to 1783, etc. Um, for me, republicanism is an ideal, a principle that is embedded in Western civilization and has taken different evolutionary developments in our times now. This side of the Enlightenment, it would be France and the United States, where republicanism is really the subject of interest for me. Um, then, of course, you had the Russian Revolution, the Paris Commune of 1871, and then Russian Revolution of 1917. You had the first Soviet Republic, the first Socialist Republic. Before the Soviet Union, it was just the 1918 Constitution of the Russian Socialist Federated, the Russian Federated Socialist Republic, and that is right before the Soviet Union. So the primitive form of the USSR is pretty interesting. Um, yeah, and yeah, yeah. Then I guess Socialist Federal Yugoslavia, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia is another interesting example, um, and the German Democratic Republic, um, the Republic of Cuba after 1959. So, yeah, I mean, Republican Marxism, that you have liberal republicanism and then the Marxist extension of it. So, all these different varieties of republicanism, socialist, Enlightenment liberal, American and French, commercial, mercantile, primitive capitalist, Dutch Republic, VOC, West India Company, medieval, Venice, classical, Rome, Gracchus brothers, etc. Yeah, so that's republicanism for me. That's what I mean republicanism. I contextualize republic. I use historical materialism as the methodology I use to organize historical information, and yeah, I find it a very useful way to organize historical information because it also incorporates the idea of progress into it, and it has a mechanism for social transformation in the form of the idea of the class struggle. And I am an advocate of that classes exist because somebody's doing the work. I mean, the working class exists because it's an aggregate of people who are doing the work in exchange for a wage, and that their existence is empirically demonstrable. Um, it's not an ideal. It's not an idealist construct. It's rooted in economic reality. Um, yeah, so that's my point. That's what I mean by Republican and Marxist, right? And Marxist, I mean by Marxist, socialism for me means workers' control of the means of production, and the workers will worker the workers in control of the means of production then organize the social organization of labor and technical organization of production. Uh, Pardon the redundancy. I use the word organizing twice, but yeah. So the workers in charge of technical organization of production and social organization of labor in context of collectivized property forms, meaning workers control the means of production. Then from there you can have a form of republicanism in which you have the workers um, elect delegate power to elected workplace representatives, um, and then these conform into Soviets, and the Soviets elect an executive committee, and that is the executive government of the socialist polity. You can call it a socialist republic if you want, a workers' republic, whatever you want to call it. I prefer to call it volunteer association of cooperative groups, premise upon collectivized property forms. That's what I understand by Marxism and socialism. And all these definitions and categories are based on classical Marxism and the classical Marxism and classical anarcho-syndicalism, Sorelian type primitive anarcho-syndicalism. Yeah. Um, so that's what I mean by Republican Marxism. Now, okay, how do you factor? Okay, all these that you talked about, where does Dominion theology comes in? Very simple. In Russian National Bolshevism, they also have Marxism, but in Russian National Bolshevism, they say Marxism minus Führerbach, and that is the formula I use. I take that idea from Russian National Bolshevism. So for me is Marxism. So I call it Republican Marxism minus Führerbach.